Trump has taken to attacking U.S. District Judge James Boasberg, who ruled at the weekend that flights deporting alleged Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador under the little-used wartime 1798 Alien Enemies Act be halted or turned around. The judge is currently evaluating whether his order was ignored by the government, prompting Trump to rail against him on social media, calling him a radical left lunatic, troublemaker and agitator who should be impeached. That prompted a rare rebuke from the country's most senior judge. Chief Justice John Roberts issued a short statement saying that for more than 2 centuries it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision, and that the normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. The president last night on Fox News.
I never did defy a court order.
And you wouldn't in the future?
No, you can't do that. However, we have bad judges. We have very bad judges, and these are judges that shouldn't be allowed. I think at a certain point you have to start looking at what do you do when you have a rogue judge.
Trump's agenda has run into roadblocks in federal courts around the country. His executive orders seeking to limit U.S. birthright citizenship blocked by several courts. Efforts by the Office of Personnel Management to lay off tens of thousands of probationary workers was rescinded by at least 2 federal judges. A decision to freeze federal funding for various initiatives blocked by a judge who called the decision irrational. An executive order freezing U.S. refugee admissions received a preliminary injunction. Efforts to stop all payments for work already done by contractors for the USAID reversed by a federal judge. This as a separate federal court ruled this week that efforts to dismantle the agency by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency likely violated the Constitution. Efforts by the administration to deport Columbia University student, Palestinian activist and green card holder Mahmoud Khalil temporarily blocked, while a federal judge is examining whether the Trump administration ignored an order to stop the deportation of alleged Venezuelan gang members to a third country over the weekend.
Administration's noncompliance with the judge's order in conducting deportations under the Alien Enemies Act after a judge had said that those deportations could not proceed does pose a serious threat to our system of checks and balances, to rule of law in the United States. It is part of a troubling pattern, however, of noncompliance with district court orders or trial court orders. I think the real test is whether we see continued noncompliance. And I know that ACLU, which is representing the plaintiffs and trying to prevent the use of the Alien Enemies Act outside the scope of its text, that they are raising the noncompliance with the court today.
As dozens of other cases also work their way through the federal court system, where the final arbiter will likely be the U.S. Supreme Court, as the General Counsel for the American Federation of Government Employees also weighed in.
The judge in our case ruled that the government has to immediately start reinstating these probationary employees, and the judge gave the government 7 days to sort of report compliance, to say, whether or not they've complied with the order and what they've done to try and comply. Our hope is that the government will comply and will start reinstating these employees and putting them back in their positions.
Order pushback against the decisions of the Trump administration, often implemented by Elon Musk's Doge.
Pretty clear to us that the Trump administration and Elon Musk are indiscriminately and unlawfully trying to eviscerate the federal government, right? What they're trying to do is pretty clear. They're breaking laws and they're firing all of our hardworking federal employees because they're in this for the billionaires, right? And the effects of this are widespread, right? They claim, that they're cutting bureaucracy, but that's not what they're really doing. They're taking hardworking Americans out of jobs, and they're harming all American citizens.
Reports that as of March 15th, at least 46 rulings have at least temporarily paused some of the president's initiatives. Branches of government are in theory equal: the executive, the legislature and the judiciary. But that could be tested by a more bullish executive that is seeking to test the limits of its authority. And it's this aspect that worries some experts that the United States could face a constitutional crisis in the near future. And while criticism of judges and their rulings is not entirely uncommon, the real test will come down to if the US Supreme Court, the final judicial arbiter, weighs in against the executive and whether the latter complies or not. The country's constitutional system essentially relies on everyone, including the executive's compliance, with the checks and balances it provides. Sherman Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.